Well, good day and welcome to another edition of OLLI Exchange, where we update folks in the OLLI community about upcoming classes and events. And with us today is Gary Barrow, retired professor of music at Arkansas Tech University. Welcome, Gary, and thanks for agreeing to lead your class titled A Great Day in Harlem.
Good morning, Josh.
Thank you. Well, Gary, so your class sounds really interesting. Can you give us a sense of some of the things folks might expect to learn from a photo taken decades ago in Harlem?
Yeah, a little bit about the history. The year was 1958. Art Cain was a very young photographer, just getting his feet wet in New York City. And he worked for Esquire Magazine. His task, and it was a formidable task, was to bring together jazz musicians, the very prominent jazz musicians in New York City, for this photo shoot in, I think it was in August, 1958. And the reason it was a big task because you and I and most people get up in the morning, eat breakfast, get in their cars and go someplace to work. But for jazz musicians then and now, they wound up doing it probably 8 o'clock at night or later. So nobody thought it could be done. But as it turned out, 57 of these, not just the greatest jazz musicians in New York, but probably the world at the time, showed up for this photo shoot.
Wow. So tell me a little bit, how did you become so interested in the photo and all the intersections it's associated with?
Well, it started with a movie. You may have seen it too. It was 2004, Steven Spielberg movie called Terminal, Tom Hanks. And so I went to the Pickwood Theater in Russellville, Arkansas, and watched it. And the connection with the picture doesn't come until about the last 13 minutes of the movie. But this fellow from a Eastern European country gets trapped at JFK Airport because of paperwork. And it's revealed at the end that his father, recently deceased, was a huge jazz fan. He had collected autographs from these guys from the famous 1958 picture, and only one remained. And his task was to go to New York and finally get that final autograph, which he's successful in doing.
That's really neat. I do remember that film. So it obviously sounds like you're a jazz enthusiast. Will attendees to get a chance to hear some of the music related to the musicians in the photo and in that era?
Yes, there's a documentary after I watched the movie, the documentary made in 1994 that I got interested in, and there's a lot of information available to people. That's by, the producer was Gene Bach. In addition, I spent quite a bit of time in Brooklyn over the last few years, and one of my last trips in 2015, I decided, would it be possible to find this location? And would it exist? Would it look the same as it did in 1958? And so I, on the advice of Duke Ellington with his famous tune, I took the A train and went to Harlem and eventually found the location. It looked exactly the same. There were no people around, so I could stand there. For me, it was hallowed ground, and take current pictures of the place. But I selected, there's so many musicians we could do, but I selected a few that we can concentrate on, study their interesting lives, and hear some of their tunes as well. And I'll look at my list so I don't forget anybody. Count Basie, Benny Golson. Benny Golson was the musician whose final autograph was sought in that movie. Benny Golson, I think, is the only living member of that group. And then the drummer, Gene Krupa, Pee Wee Russell, who's a clarinetist that goes back to New Orleans, Dixieland. 2 sax players, Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins, and a name that some people might remember, Marian McPartland, who for decades did a show on NPR called Piano Jazz.
Well, man, that's folks, there you have it. I mean, that's what a fun way to learn about some of the jazz greats, the music they created. Gary, you've taught a number of classes for OLLI before. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your upcoming class?
No, except that it'll be fun to be live again.
Absolutely. So yeah, as Gary said, as we mentioned, his class is titled A Great Day in Harlem. The first of 2 sessions for his class will be held at 1:30 p.m. in person live on October 4th at Drake Field. So Gary, thanks again for joining us. We hope that you'll take his class, and thank you again.
Thank you, Josh.
Oh.